and Paulinha, who's down in Brazil, and she WhatsApped me yesterday, I think it was, about some ideas for a topic that is quite an intriguing and juicy topic for all people on the spiritual journey. So, welcome, Paulinha. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here to talk about this deep topic, and I can't wait to hear you sharing about it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
beautiful. Well, maybe we can start with just I think you were visiting your family, so you're really practicing the course, linking in with Jesus, praying and listening and following the guidance. And it sounds like you had maybe a visit to your biological family, and maybe that combined with just the curiosity in your mind was coming up in regard to this topic. So maybe you can share a little context.
Yeah, sure. Uh, yeah, I spent some time at the monastery, like in devotional stay, and was really, really deep and beautiful. And when I came back to Brazil, I started to notice like this reflection from my family. Uh, yeah, about this. And I started to watch my mind and really pay attention to these reflections because I felt my mom, like my biological mom, like wanted to be closer, and my sister and my father. And I was like, what's going on? Like, really, I want to know Jesus, like what this truly means. And then I started to pray and really talk to Jesus because I wanted, like, I wanted truth. Like, I don't want to play any role like sister or daughter, but I don't want to exclude them. And how do I do this? Like, because I know that it's not like the family as we learn in the world. So how I do this, like how I truly include them in this spiritual practice, like without playing roles. And it was funny because my father, he's so cute. He called me and he said, "Oh, I want to ask you something." And I say, "Okay, Dad." And he's like, "I need you to take care of your sister." And I freeze and say, "Tell me more. What do you think about this?" And I was like inside my head, "Jesus, please come here and translate this to me." And he started to share, like, she's so sensitive and she misses you, and now that you are there with Frequência do Amor, you need to include her. And he actually said this word, like, include her. And then I stopped and I realized that I, like, somehow was like excluding them. And yeah, I was praying and say, I need help to really heal this and not exclude, and really include them, and without playing roles. And I was watching actually like the many different reflections since I came back. Like, all my friends here are like having children. And I was watching this, and actually like close friends that I have a deep connection, that have deep connection with family, as like the word teaches. And I don't know, like, I've been sharing with you that this subject about uh, family, it's been like very I don't know, unwinding for me. And I know that many students have this too, because it's a strong self-concept. So it feels really good to be here to talk and to to shine some light, true light,
Yeah,
about this.
yeah, that's beautiful. Well, it's so beautiful because I've been doing some live broadcasts about the Course in Miracles workbook lessons, and basically, Jesus is starting out with mind training on lesson 1, telling us that what we perceive doesn't mean anything, and that we've just given egoic meaning to everything that we perceive, and that we have to change our purpose. And at the beginning, he's not calling it purpose so much in the workbook lessons as he's saying, he calls it your own best interest. So your own best interest being happiness and peace and love and joy. But he's saying in no circumstance do you perceive your own best interest. And then the next lesson, he says, everything is for your own best interest. And so I think it comes down to that self-honesty and authenticity. And when we talked yesterday, you were saying, yeah, wow, I'm watching it. I'm really watching it. And I think that's part of the practice of mind training. We watch our emotions. We watch if there's a trigger. We watch if we're pulled or swayed, because surely we can see that the world as we've perceived it in the past, we perceived some people as more important than other people. Certainly the family has been very much a part of this, the image and the self-concept that the ego made. And yet, whenever we talk about just please show me to see everyone equally, or love everyone equally, or love everyone unconditionally like Jesus did, then we start to notice that in the world and on the timeline, this inclusion exclusion thing is very strong. And I think we could say that inclusion, however we define it, included in a family, included in a partnership, included in could be anything, a country or a culture or a society, that inclusion oftentimes is associated with love. And then exclusion is often associated with hatred or bitterness. And so, like your dad, saying, can I ask you something? And, can you take care of your sister? It's kind of like underneath that is your sister needs to be loved. And then whatever that would mean, your sister needs to feel loved. So it seems like when we're on the spiritual journey, we start to come to a self-honesty about this love. We can start to begin to realize, when we do the course and we go through those 9 chapters on special relationships, chapters 15 to 24, they're pretty overt, saying that love is not partial. Love is holistic. When you love wholeheartedly. And so we get a glimpse of that from the text. And then when we get into the workbook, we hear Jesus coming on even more strong with it, saying there is no love but God's. That truly love, since God is love, you have to really have that direct connection with God. And that, in that sense, you do have love. You do experience love. So it's different than possessive love, because this love is all inclusive, and it doesn't have any aspect of exclusion. We're being told by Jesus that God doesn't exclude. God loves equally and forever and for always and eternally. And when we look at this world, we can see that the whole world seems to be a projection of the ego, and the ego is the belief in separation and exclusion. So we're starting to think, oh my gosh, I need to be rinsed. My mind, my consciousness needs to be rinsed of what Jesus calls specialness. But another word for specialness is just judgment. When we're looking at somebody and we're judging, oh, even that they're special or more special than another person, then that's a judgment in the mind. And Jesus is teaching us that you don't know love when you judge, that judgment and love don't go together. So it's kind of interesting, because I know when you came to the monastery, you brought up this phrase, family of God. I want to know what the family of God is. And I think that gets right to the heart of the matter, because if we just try to describe it in terms of the timeline and bodies and people, then if you try to pick a certain group or a certain configuration of persons and say, these are my family, then that other group that's the rest don't seem to be part of that family. But you and I were talking when you were here at the monastery. It's like a vibrational thing, or frequency de more. It's really a frequency thing. It's like a frequency in your heart, a frequency in your mind.
Yeah, but what do we do when we, because of this frequency, I noticed that I feel more connected with some people, but not like the people. It's because we have projects together, we collaborate. So, and sometimes I watch it my mind and I see this, like it feels like a guilt maybe, that I was like more closer to Michelle, for example, or Patty or Ligi, that works with these projects here, than with my sister. And I watch in my mind, it's like it feels that I'm excluding her, but it's not. It's just like this connection for a higher purpose. And it's sometimes I see my mind a little bit confused about it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I think it comes down to our purpose, that if we're with the Holy Spirit and we're with Jesus in our mind, then we're in our purpose, or we're in our function, or we're in smack dab in the middle of our life's calling, and there's joy. And then what Jesus wants us to do is, like, he wants us to transfer that purpose to everything and everyone. And so here we are at the beginning of the year in January, and he's using the lessons to say, let your eyes move around the room, uh, and see that hand and that leg and that tree and that light and that picture. Let your mind apply the lesson of the day to everything, and let your eyes move around kind of in an even pace, so you don't emphasize one object or one image more than the other. And it's part of this transfer of training, I think, to help us take this purpose, or this torch of forgiveness, and transfer it to everything. And admittedly, once we start to get into the flow, there's people that are sent to us. We seem to laugh more frequently. There's joy, and we would never have even predicted that we would be doing projects or things. I know you said you didn't particularly see yourself doing videos or broadcasts, and definitely not English speaking.
No,
That would have been the last thing ever. In fact,
ever.
when Gabriel said that to you, you just were like saying, "What? What do you mean I'm going to do English interviews? No, no." And that's the way it goes. And so there's a synergy and a happiness and joy as we experience this shared purpose. And then still, though, when we think of certain people, like maybe when you think of your sister, you can have thoughts of, like, ego comparison thoughts coming in, like, wait a minute, maybe we were closer when we were younger, but maybe we don't seem to share the same interest or the same value or the same purpose. And Jesus is in our mind saying, oh, yeah, you do share the purpose that I'm giving with you, with everyone and everything. And you need to transfer it to every situation and every person that comes to mind. And that's where you release the guilt, because if there's any sense of more or less, or better or worse, or just general comparisons like, wow, I was happier with them back then, but now I'm happier with another set of people that aren't my biological family, that's where the guilt starts to come in, because it's still a comparison. And I always say that it's perception that is fragmented or cracked, and the reason that we even seem to look at a through the filter at a fragmented world is because the ego has assigned separate purposes to everything and everyone. So there's one called my sister. And out of all the billions of people, this sister is given the title sister. Even though when we get into spirituality, we do tend to use sister and brother in a different way, just a more natural way. Oh, hello. Oh, here's my sister over here, or my brother here. And it's more generic. It's more all-inclusive. But whenever we have one called a sister or a mother or a father or a brother or even an aunt, an uncle, a niece, a nephew, you can see that's part of this overlay of assigning meanings and this, in this case, titles even and roles. And there was a recent episode of The Chosen where Jesus went back to Nazareth to visit his mother, Ima, and it was Mary, but they like an affectionate name, Ima, and then I guess his James and Jude, his biological brothers, had left and gone to the next town when Jesus was visiting, and then Mother Mary was making some excuses. Well, you just gotta love them, let them do their thing. But Jesus hadn't been back there for a long time, and instead of having a big family celebration with brothers there, it was just Mother Mary and Jesus talking. And then he met Lazarus, and he met his old friends, and the thing that you're wanting to explore was on full display on that one Chosen episode where Jesus went back, and he was still kind of friendly and open-hearted, but also he seemed kind of reflective, prayerful and reflective, like he was watching, like you said, you're just watching your reactions, watching your emotions. Jesus was watching. So if we bring it back to terms that we can understand, what Jesus is saying, like in the setting the goal section of the text, he says, you need to have your purpose out front. And if you decide in advance what the purpose of the interaction is, what the purpose of the talk or the encounter, if you decide in advance that your purposes will say peace or joy or love, and you hold that firm in front as you go through the situation, then you will perceive everyone and everything playing their part perfectly. But if you don't have a clear-cut purpose, a very strong, clear-cut purpose in front, then the situation just seems to happen, and then the ego looks back on it and goes, my dad's trying to get me back together with my sister, but she's still my sister. It may try to bring in sow some seeds of doubt, like, am I not loving enough that this has to be brought to my attention? am I not loving enough that I get a phone call? like, and the tendency is always, when we're looking back on something and we're feeling like something's lacking or missing, then it's the ego. As the ego is the belief in lack. The ego is the belief in conditional love, in partial love, and it always wants us to be on edge. Did I love enough? Was I a good enough sister? And Jesus is saying, well, you'll be the perfect sister when everyone is your sister. You'll be the perfect brother when everyone is your brother. And it's going to take some mind training to get there, because it's not our default program as we come to this world. Our default program is specialness and exclusion. And in this world, exclusion is love. And total inclusion would be seen by the ego as a joke. It would, oh yeah, you're supposed to love everyone. Haha, the ego.
A utopia, like something very far away, right?
Yeah, that's it. And I think it's good to remember that the ego made this world of time and space, and the ego made the false perception, the fragmented perception. And then I think the last time we met, we were talking, or I believe you were saying, I had said something in one talk where I said, fantasy is not something that's just isolated, that the whole world as we perceive it in fragmentation is fantasy. So it's not something that's just a few imagination things. It's literally what we're facing during our nighttime dreams and our daily lives, as long as we're breaking things apart, as long as we don't know our true function is forgiveness.
Wow. Yeah. And I just realized that was just like another trick of the ego to keep the excluding game, because in my mind the story was like this: no, I don't want to play this family role, so it's like no for like sister or father and mother, so it is still like excluding, because it's like it's not like uh neutral,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
It's like, it's something that I want to, that I don't want to, but it's still something that I don't want to, right?
Yeah. That's like those workbook lessons. I have no neutral thoughts. I see no neutral things. So if I don't have, if my thoughts are not neutral about my family, then I won't see my family in a neutral way. And for some people, they think, oh, neutral sounds kind of boring and bland and everything. Well, actually, the Holy Spirit sees the world of symbols as neutral, so that the Holy Spirit can impart the true meaning, the true word of God, the true unconditional love to our mind. The Holy Spirit sees the symbols, the images are just symbols. They're neutral symbols. So I think that's good, because when you get deeper into it, I think the desire is to feel love toward everyone, but you've just identified that sometimes it's a push away. Like, well, I have important things to do and important people to see that are in with my function, and then if they're not in my function, then they don't seem to be as important. And Jesus is saying, well, it's a way of looking. So I want you to see everyone as included in this love equally. And yeah, that's very, very astute to start to notice, oh, I have a little bit of a push away there.
Wow.
And also, we've talked in the past. I remember before you and Gabriel got married, you would say, oh, my mom is saying, are you going to have children? And when will I
No,
get
no, we actually say, when you gonna give me a grand.
okay. It was and then you had a reaction like, oh, because there was a strong expectation. And of course, that's how the ego made the world, with lots of expectations, parental expectations, expectations of children toward their parents, and children, siblings toward each other. And even in partnerships, there can be really heavy expectations, like one of them is put me above everyone else in the world,
Yeah.
where you hear it kind of said as a thing on a relationship site. Every woman wants to be the only woman that they're cared for above all others. But put me above all others, and then when you get this agape love of Jesus, where he seemed to be friendly with everyone and gazing around at everyone and fully like engaged in every situation, like he's there and he's very steady, he's very stable, because he has transcended this egoic thing of lifting some people up and putting some people down. And that gets just seen as to be, oh, that's just the way the world is. And Jesus is saying, no, you don't know the real world. You don't know the happy dream if you're playing this comparison game and lifting some up and putting others down. In this world, we call that prejudice. In this world, we call that bigotry. In this world, it's not a positive thing.
No.
And yet, need mind training to escape it. We can't just say, "Oh, I'll try to do better next time." We need to face what we believe right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm so grateful. The first time I heard you say this, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so far away from this." And now hearing again, it feels more like possible, more closer. It still needs like a lot of training and like be really vigilant, but it's really possible, and it's so, yeah. Sometimes I was asking myself, like when I met you, how does David do this? Like, I mean, he's so friendly with everyone. He never uh, have a reaction. Like it doesn't matter what's going on. And now it's like, oh, it is possible. Thank you, David.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's it.
for
That's
showing the
that's
way.
that's our purpose. And I just thank you for always being so transparent too, because I know you and Gabriel have come to visit me when I was in Mexico, and then you and Gabriel have been up here to the monastery and just openly shared. Even here at the monastery, the people that live here were like, "Oh, Paulina's here. We're so excited. We're so happy." And did you see Gabriel's eyes? Oh my gosh, it's like Jesus. It's like we have Jesus at the monastery. And you've told me for some years, well, if we had a movie of Jesus, yeah, Gabriel could play Jesus. He could play the part. And
Thank
yet
you.
when you started building you got married, started building your first house together, and then that's when it is those are the times for the mind training and the expansion, because when you come together and you're doing even a shared project, at times the ego will want to come up and just say, with this room I want it thus, and this is not negotiable. This is going to be a white kitchen, or there won't be it won't be in the house if it's not. And then, but this is what people love to hear. Like they actually are saying, like, wow, you've devoted your life to follow Jesus and to really join with Jesus in mind and live the teachings. And then in the relationships with family, with partners, with even with your coworkers and frequency to more, there's so many opportunities. It's just ripe. Every day is ripe with so many opportunities to not give in to the judgment, not give in to the wish to be special, and to be just friendly with everyone and be open-minded. That's the last characteristic of a teacher of God, just to be there and be wide-eyed and open-minded. And if somebody says they have an issue, then you just listen. Like Jesus was good at listening to the apostles. He would just listen and listen. He didn't always, we get a ding right during that. That's like a keynote. So that is quite a high calling. We have to admit that we have a very deep and profound and high calling, and then to really stay with it is no small thing.
No, it's definitely not. Like many invitations to compromise, like this thing, for example, could be something. Because if I wasn't like really, really present, like could like go just pass through and say, "Oh, that's normal. Like it's just my father calling me." No, I know it's not. I don't want to this. I want to be free, really, from like, and I think my prayer is, as you said, like when we were at the monastery, we did like the Christmas tree with the prayers, and the true connection and give as God gives and love everybody with no exception was my prayer. So I knew that this like family of God theme that still that arrived in
Mhm.
at the Florida retreat, and when I came back I was like, okay, Jesus is answer me, so it's not a coincidence. This.
Yeah,
I want to hear this. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, speaking of that Florida retreat, it was great because you and Gabriel were there, and Ligi was there with her husband, and none of us knew. We thought it was just a retreat over Christmas with pretty lights, the light of Christ. And then when we got there, suddenly on the first night, the theme shifted more to let's take a closer look at relationships and specifically at marriage and divorce. And so that's a pretty good example of what we're talking about, because in the world there's a big difference, to in the world definitions of things between marriage and divorce. It's kind of like the same with birth and death. Most people in most cultures, they celebrate the birth and they mourn the death. And I think, again, we could say the same thing with marriage and divorce. Most people in most cultures celebrate the marriage and they mourn the divorce. And I think this is a good example of how Jesus is saying, well, you're making distinctions in form between different concepts of form, and he's saying, I want you to celebrate and be in your right mind and
Mm.
not mourn and be in your wrong mind. Because wrong-minded perceptions are always just interpretations that involve loss or grief, or something terrible has happened, something has gone wrong, something
Mhm.
in form has gone wrong. And Jesus is saying, well, the filter that you're looking at, the purpose that you're looking at the situation is where the error is. It's an error in purpose in the mind. The ego's purpose produces a lot of dark emotions. The Holy Spirit's purpose, the right mind, it brings a lot of joy and peace and happiness. So right away, when we just look at it from that straight, simple way, we can see that, wow, this Jesus is just really calling us to be right-minded, meaning
Mhm.
be in alignment with God. And
Yeah.
God doesn't sponsor fear and greed and anger and envy and jealousy, all those emotions, guilt. God is not a sponsor of those emotions. That's what I like about what Jesus has shown me in my life. He's like, no, don't think that, you know, God has anything to do with those emotions, because if you do, you're going to be afraid to meet your creator at some point. You're going to you're going to have some fear and trepidation of meeting the creator. And he said, no, you will feel the love when you finally meet your creator. When you see the true relationship you have with God, then you will feel joy. So this is our little laboratory, our linear laboratory of time and space. Really, it's our mind is the laboratory, and that's why every time we talk, we seem to come back to, oh, what's going on in my mind?
Yeah. I have something here in mind. Maybe we can talk about it because um, there is one teaching from you that I always carry with me, that it's about um, the desires and expectations that we have uh, from the world. And you always says that when you want something from the world will want something from you back, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And when we talk about marriage or families and like relationships, how this applies, because for example, in this case I feel that my mom is like feels like they want something from me, like my dad wants me to be closer, my sister wants me to be closer, like yeah, maybe we can talk about it, like it feels good to shine some light about this.
yeah, yeah. Well, we could say, I think, simply that the Holy Spirit is teaching our mind to remember how to give as God gives, and God gives eternally, fully, 100%, with no strings attached and with no reciprocity. God doesn't have any expectations. Um, and even when people read the Bible, they will read things in the Bible like, don't, never take the Lord's name in vain or God's name in vain. And they'll put that on as if like God's expecting you to not curse. Don't ever curse, and don't curse with God's name, or that's not good at all. You're in trouble. You'll be penalized or suffer for that one. And God isn't like that. God is a being of pure love, so God doesn't want to get anything from the creations. God is just extending love to creations forever in a continuous flow, but there's no reciprocity. So I think when you talk about the relationships of the world, whether they're family relationships or partners or uh, biological, kind of connections that seem to be there at the beginning of the time space birth, that really it comes down to letting go of expectations, and the expectations are coming from the ego, which is the getting mechanism. So if we believe that we need to get something from the biological parents, we'll say our mom and dad, then it carries on as almost like a broken record. It carries on as a difficulty and a problem for us for as long as we expect to get something from them. Even if we expect them to love us, then we remember the St. Francis prayer, I want to love rather than to be loved. Uh, I want to give that I may receive the love. And that's what Jesus is teaching us. If you give love, you'll receive it for yourself, because giving and receiving are the same. But when we look to parents for approval or some version of love, that it could involve frequency of contact or frequency of communication. It could be involved going to Christmas and birthdays and getting presents. And then if we don't get the presents, we, oh, what happened? What went wrong? Did I do something wrong? But quite simply, it's the getting mechanism in the mind, which is the ego. And God did not create this getting mechanism. So if we just use our relationships, whether they're partnerships or family relationships or work relationships or our neighbors or anyone, just for the giving, just to be the bright light and to give, then we receive that light in the giving of it. And then we remember that we are the light because we keep giving it. And suddenly it has to dawn on our mind, oh, we have no shortage of love. We were created as love. We are that light. But I would say it's the getting mechanism. So it's common for children, for example, to say, well, I hope they leave me a big inheritance. And I get the biggest kick. One time I was reading something recently where toward the end of Gandhi's life, he told all of his children there would be no inheritance. Also, I read that just recently, maybe a week ago. There was a singing duo from back in the days when I was growing up called Donnie and Marie Osmond, and they had their own TV show. And they said Marie Osmond will not be leaving any inheritance for her children. She was making a declaration. Now, whenever somebody comes out, whether it's Gandhi or Marie Osmond, people always go, "Oh, wow, that's breaking the norm," because good parents should leave inheritances for their children. But there's a lot of those norms and beliefs. And I think Gandhi was just one of those, live in the moment, give everything you've got in the moment, and you can't take it with you. He was not interested in future. Yeah, he was so into the present moment, nonviolence and peace and love and joy, that it just transferred to everything in his life. And I think for him, it was a very natural thing to say. We're just working, doing the mind training so we can feel it's natural to not expect things from our parents, or with children, not expect things from our children. Even recently, I was doing the workbook lessons, and one of the women wrote in saying, my youngest son just plays on computer games and on his phone so much of the time, and then her husband and the older brother kind of get very aggressive with the younger brother, and she was like, how do I sort this out? How do I clear it out? And in the end, it's only through the giving. If we can feel the presence of God's love, then that will instruct us what to say and to do, to teach that love is equal. We can love everyone equal, not based on whether they behave or don't behave. You still can have guidelines and say, okay, well, if you're not off that phone or computer, then there's going to have to be some guidelines here. You can still do that with loving guidance, but your emotional state is one of calmness and tranquility and love. It's not one of anger or irritation. But those are the things, I think, when it comes down to the ones that seem to be closest to us in form, the biological family and the partnerships and everything, that's where the temptation to get something back is strongest. And then the farther they appear from us, like somebody who's living on the other side of the world, Vladimir Putin, it's like, what do I want from Vladimir? I send my blessings to Vladimir. But if that cat pees on that white bedspread again, you see how the closer it gets, even if it's a cat, if it's Elvis or something, your cat, you can see how the intensity, the charge, the trigger is there, because you still expect to get a certain behavior, even that in your household. You see how subtle it is. Yeah, it's the getting mechanism. That's what we're asking Jesus to wash away from our mind.
And it's really, really deep, because even if I want them to not want something from me, I still want something for them. It's really tricky.
Yeah.
And wow. And sometimes I talk to Jesus about this, because we live in the same city, and it feels that he needs me here. Like, I've been praying, it's like, okay, so it feels like for some reason it's part of his plan for me to be here.
Yeah.
And they invite me to lunch and to dinner, and I have to pray, and sometimes it's no. And I was like, I always remember Frances, when that story, when she went back to China and her mother invited her to have lunch, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And then she prays like, Mom, I'm sorry, like I can't. And yeah, it's deep. It's really deep. This, like, I can't even want them to not want something from me. I still need to pray. And wow, it's really deep.
Yeah. It's reminding me of my parable when I wasn't only living, doing the course, and not only living in the same city of Cincinnati as my mother, but living in the same house. and that's really close. And then it would be, are you going to join us for a family reunion or for a birthday party? This was a very active family. So as I'm praying, meditating, going very deep inward, and really practicing my lessons, there's these huge amount of invitations that are coming, pretty much many invitations every week, not even a few, many. And then I had to pray to Jesus. I said, you're going to have to put the words in my mouth, and you're going to have to take over of this situation, because I cannot handle this. This is too much. This is too much and too stressful. And so then I would just pray and pray, and I would just really let go. And Jesus was always so friendly through me. He would always uh, be thankful. I would say, or he would say through me to my mother, thank you so much for asking, and thank you for the invitation. I'll have to pray on that. Sometimes that would come, because it would come so rapid fire. Thank you so much for thinking of me. Thank you for the invitation. I'll pray on that. And then sometimes I prayed on it, and I'd have to say, no, I don't feel I'm supposed to go to that or this or that. And sometimes it was met with sometimes a reaction,
Mm,
a seeming negative reaction. But even that, I could feel Jesus was saying, I just want you to follow my guidance, and I don't want you interpreting the reactions. Don't interpret the face of your mother or the tone of her voice. Don't
yeah.
be looking to the effects and judging them as good or bad. He said, I'm just asking you to follow my guidance, and that will help clear your mind of these ego thoughts. But if
Mm,
you insist on interpreting the reactions, he said, this is going to go very slow. He
mm,
said,
mm.
this forgiveness is going very slow if you keep interpreting. So leave it to me to what to say and do not interpret. So that helped me. I had to really practice that a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's really helpful because if we interpret, like, we got lost, like trying to understand, we just need to stay in trust and follow.
Yeah, yeah. I had a
Wow.
lot with with my family too. I remember a time when I would go occasionally. I would accept to go to a restaurant or a birthday party, but I had my sister and her children and my niece and nephews, and there's expectations even around birthday parties, that
Mm-hmm.
you bring a present. And I remember I was trusting. I'd been in university for years. I didn't have a job. I was basically practicing my course lessons and trying to do it as devoted as I could, but I really didn't have a lot of money at all to even be buying presents. So when I would say yes and accept an invitation to go to my niece's birthday party, then I would get more opportunities at the birthday party. There's nothing like going to a birthday party and celebrating and having cake and dancing and glee and joy and everything. And then as you go to leave, you say bye to everybody. You go out the door, you're walking to your car, and the little niece comes out with a look on her face. Uncle David, didn't you get me a present today? That's when you need Jesus, when you have the little face of your niece looking up at you and saying, Uncle David, didn't you give me a present like everyone else? And I remember I just closed my eyes for a second, opened them, and then Jesus came in and just gave her a big hug and said, every time I play with you, every time we share this joy together, that is the present. And she
Wow.
smiled and she said, yeah, that's true. And she gave me a big hug and a big squeeze. And I was like, oh, holy Jesus, that was a big one. If you try to handle that on your own, you
No.
are walking into that car to the car with guilt.
With feeling the worst uncle ever.
Yeah. And that's a good example of when you want something from the world will want something from you. My niece saying, Uncle David, didn't you get me a present? But it came and Jesus came through me in a way that brought a miracle. It was literally giving the love without falling into the guilt trap. And how precious is that? That is really what we want to do.
Yeah.
Even in relationships, when friends say, well, I have to go my own way, or, I can't continue on. I remember I was watching the movie Gandhi. And in the movie Gandhi, it's a very long movie, but there's a priest, a Catholic priest, who comes from England to come down. He so admires Gandhi, and he's there to help support Gandhi with everything. But there comes a point after they collaborate and work for years where Gandhi's in jail, and Charlie is the name of the priest. Charlie comes to visit Gandhi in jail. And Gandhi's been praying, and basically there's a lot of conflict between the Hindus and the Muslims, and Gandhi's whole ministry is under a microscope with everybody. There's huge tensions going on around him. Plus, Gandhi's in prison, and so basically Gandhi has to say, "Well, Charlie, I think you've served very well here, and our time of being used together in a collaboration, it's ending, it's over. And oh, Charlie looks so sad. Like having Gandhi say that to him. Charlie is so sad. His whole face is almost like he can't believe that he's hearing those words from Gandhi. And then Gandhi, here comes the presence of God through Gandhi. Gandhi just smiles very softly and says, Charlie, for us, there are no goodbyes. So even in form, though it was a goodbye, in content, Gandhi smiled and with his twinkly eyes, behind prison bars even, says, his dear, dear, dear friend Charlie, for us, there are no goodbyes, meaning we're forever. We'll be in love forever. But in terms of the form, this is the way that it needs to go. And if you could transfer that same thing to even relationships, it's such a grief with a loved one dying or a partner leaving and saying, I'm going my own separate ways. There's so much grief and darkness. But if we would just take an instant to just pray to Jesus and say, just show me this through your eyes and give me the words to say, we would be able to let him speak through us. For us, there are no goodbyes. Our love goes on forever and ever and ever. So those things touch me. You know how I like movies, but when I was maybe in my 20s or whatever, watching that Gandhi movie, those scenes, they stay with me forever because they're examples that we can actually live as Christ would have us live. It's not just words or lip service. Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming on. Wow, this is feeling like it's sending a blessing of healing across the universe. And and I know there were people tuning in. I wrote to a friend of mine last night, Luana, who I think was in one of your online groups there, and she had a call with her mother in Brazil and just spoke from the heart and was like gonna say, this is what my life is. And yeah, so it's every day we're dealing with these kind of opportunities. And so yeah, what a great chance we have to do this, share this together.
Wow, I'm so grateful. Yeah, and for our friends from Brazil, we have a volunteer that is gonna help us to translate this beautiful talk. So soon we're gonna share it in Portuguese.
Oh, beautiful. There's always someone showing up to help.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned to me there's a new technology you found that does pretty good with accurate subtitles. So maybe you can send me the link on WhatsApp, because I thought, wow, if that's an improvement over YouTube's automatic translation subtitles, that would be helpful even for movies where we find a great movie and we want to have some really good Portuguese subtitles that are accurate.
Yeah. Gabriel found this. The other Gabriel that works here in the frequency. We have two angels. Both of them actually found this, and it's from the other Gabriel's friends. It's a software that people use to put subtitles for online courses, and it's good. Like you have to pay. I think it's less than £1 for the minute to translate, but it's very accurate. So we are using to translate.
Okay. Well, Andy and Nicholas and JP, we'll let our tech team
Yeah, I'll
look into
share.
that software. That'll be good. Well, thank you, Paulina.
Thank you so much, David. Yeah, so happy.
Beautiful. And thank you for all of you joining in. It looks like we've got 91 people on with us live today. So,
wow.
Beautiful.
And thank you, Andy, for helping us here.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Many blessings. Love you.
Bye.